questions.
So that's a really excellent point, that what we really have to
All of this available online at cspan.org. We'll leave here and take you live next to the U.S. House. They're gaveling in for work on 3 bills, including one that would approve the northern portion of the Keystone XL pipeline. In the Senate today, they continue on work on amendments to the Farm Bill. Amendment votes likely throughout the day. Follow the Senate on C-SPAN 2, and now live to the House floor here on C-SPAN.
The House will be in order. Prayer will be offered today by our guest chaplain, Dr. Ken Whitten, Idlewild Baptist Church, Lutz, Florida.
Would you bow your heads? Our Father in heaven, our heads are bowed because that is the position of humility, a spiritual characteristic that in your word you said brings grace. We fold our hands to express godly fear, because you said that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and we all recognize, Lord, that today that is the need of this hour and the need of this day. Our hearts, Lord, break with the families in Moore, Oklahoma. The loss and devastation leave us speechless. But it is in these heart-wrenching days that we find ourselves saying that we are not Republicans or Democrats or independents. We are one nation in need of grace and healing and salvation. We pray that the decisions in this chamber today will reflect your heart, a heart for the broken, the bruised, the abused, and the abandoned. And may you help us today to think more about the spiritual than the economical, more about the eternal than the temporal. And Lord, may we echo that Puritan prayer of old, what we know not, teach us. What we have not, give us. And what we are not, make us. And it is in Jesus' wonderful name that we pray. Amen and amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. Pledge of allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Olson.
I ask members, staff, and guests in gallery to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bilirakis, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate it very much. I rise today to welcome Pastor Ken Whitten before the House of Representatives. Pastor Whitten serves as the senior pastor at Lutz, Florida's Idlewild Baptist Church, which has served the Tampa Bay area, the community, for over 80 years. While originally based out of the old garage building, today it serves a congregation of more than 12,000 members on a 143-acre campus. Under Pastor Whitten's leadership, the Idlewild family has placed a focus on both local and global missions, a biblical guidance ministry, instructional classes for those who seek to grow spiritually, and activities and many ministries for all ages. Pastor Whitten is a pillar of our community and has guided tens of thousands of people as they develop and grow their personal relationship with the Lord. Mr. Speaker, I welcome Pastor Whitten to our nation's capital, and I yield back.
The Chair will entertain 15 further requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
Question unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute. Advising extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Earlier this month, I visited the Explosive Ordnance Disposal Memorial on Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. The memorial wall is located across from the EOD school where men and women from every branch are trained in the elite and specialized skills necessary to locate, identify, render safe, recover, evaluate, and dispose of explosives. As former Army EOD, I understand the critical role our EOD forces play as the key enablers in the ongoing war on IEDs, both at home and abroad. I also understand the omnipresent danger that our EOD warriors face on the battlefield and on civil support missions here in the United States. The memorial wall contains the names of the brave men and women of the EOD community who have given their lives in defense of our freedom. The memorial wall does an excellent job of recognizing the incredible sacrifice that our EOD forces and all of our men and women in uniform make every day on our behalf. I'd like to take a moment to honor the EOD warriors who lost their lives in the line of duty between World War II and Vietnam but are not recognized on that wall. These men and women served valiantly and lost their lives in the line of duty, but are not included on the wall because they were not physically assigned to an EOD unit at the time of their death. These brave warriors lost their lives performing EOD duties in support of their fellow soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and deserve to be recognized for their service. With Memorial Day approaching, now is an appropriate time to recognize their sacrifice. I'd like to submit their names for inclusion in the congressional record. God bless our troops and God bless the United States of America.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair asks all members to remove communicative badges prior to addressing the House. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Instead of working together to find a compromise to fully reverse the sequester, House Republicans have turned their backs on the American people and are jeopardizing our fragile economy. In fact, sequestration will cost 750,000 jobs this year alone, according to the Congressional Budget Office. We saw last month how quickly and easily these cuts can be addressed when Congress passed legislation to address the traffic control of furloughs. But we have not been given the opportunity to address the 70,000 children who could lose access to Head Start or any of the other programs that have been crippled. Funding for the National Institutes of Health has shrunk by $1.5 billion, cutting into life-saving medical research for areas that include breast cancer, heart disease, and Alzheimer's. The cuts from NIH alone will result in a loss of more than 20,000 jobs and $3 billion in economic activity. We can address these cuts with cooperation. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, under the threat of perjury, a Tea Party in Texas 22 was asked these questions by the IRS. Question 1, have you attempted or will you attempt to influence the outcome of specific legislation? That activity is protected by the Constitution. Is this America? A second question, do you directly or indirectly communicate with members of legislative bodies? That activity is protected by the Constitution. Is this America? This is not America. And House Republicans are going to restore America by giving the people the truth they deserve. I yield back.
Time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative represents our nation's commitment to protecting the health of our Great Lakes, the largest source of fresh water in the world, representing $7 billion in economic activity annually. In western New York, the revitalization of Buffalo's inner and outer harbor depends on efforts to restore the health of Lake Erie and the Buffalo River. The Environmental Protection Agency will soon host a series of public meetings to gain community input to guide the next phase of Great Lakes restoration, and one of the meetings will be held in Buffalo. Madam Speaker, the Great Lakes are a unique natural treasure with global significance. The Brookings Institute report shows that for every $1 invested in Great Lakes restoration, a $2 return in the form of increased fishing, tourism, and home values is achieved. It's our responsibility to ensure that the Restoration Initiative is fully funded in this year's appropriations, and also to be an active partner in protecting and restoring our Great Lakes. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, it's a rare occasion when Democrats, Republicans, the President and his supporters, and the public all agree on something. What doesn't make sense is that while we all agree it's time to build the Keystone Pipeline, President Obama has blocked construction for over 4 years. The Keystone Pipeline would create over 42,000 jobs. It will invest $7 billion into the U.S. economy, and it will increase the U.S. energy security and independence by safely transporting 830,000 barrels of oil per day, nearly half of what the U.S. currently imports from unstable, hostile nations. At a time when gas prices are on the rise and unemployment remains around 8%, we cannot afford to delay this project any longer. The President's own website says we need an all-out, all-of-the-above energy strategy that develops every available source of American energy. I would say, Mr. President, you have a lot to worry about today and currently. So forget about this one and let us take on and let the oil flow. So the Keystone Project is ready, Congress is ready, the public is ready. Mr. Speaker, is the President ready? I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Members are advised to address the House, to address the chair. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, for over 200 years, the U.S. Merchant Marine has been a pillar in the foundation of our country's national security and economic growth. And so it is fitting that every year on May 22nd, we celebrate National Maritime Day in recognition of their service and sacrifice across the centuries. On this day, we reflect on the service of the men and women of the Merchant Marines who served during World War II, many thousands of whom died delivering the arsenal of democracy over the seas to the battlefields of Europe and the Pacific. Merchant mariners died at a higher rate in World War II than any uniformed service. Unfortunately, the veterans of the Merchant Marines who risked their lives in the service of this nation and all freedom-loving nations were never eligible for the provisions of the GI Bill that helped millions of veterans go to college, secure a home, and transition seamlessly into civilian life. That's why I introduced the Honoring Our World War II Merchant Mariners Act of 2013. This bill would provide a $1,000 monthly benefit to the nearly 10,000 surviving World War II mariners. By providing this modest benefit, we will finally be giving our brave merchant mariners the recognition and benefits they deserve.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I come to the House floor today to honor all those who died fighting for our country. This coming Monday, this nation will observe Memorial Day, a day set aside to pay tribute to the brave men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice for their country in defense of our freedom. As members of Congress, so much of what we do on behalf of our constituents touches the military in some way. Recently, my office secured a new Silver Star Medal for the late John Chase, a World War II veteran from Batavia, New York. Drafted into the Army, Mr. Chase fought bravely in the Battle of Rhineland in 1945, a critical victory for the Allied forces. Last month, as he grew increasingly ill, Mr. Chase's family reached out to my office for help in securing a new medal. In the process, we discovered Mr. Chase also qualified for the Bronze Star, which he had never received. We were able to present the medals to Mr. Chase's family the day he passed, allowing them to be properly displayed at his funeral. I want to thank Mr. Chase posthumously for his distinguished service and pay my respects to all Americans killed in wars, both present and past. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank Madam Speaker, and I rise today to bring awareness to the devastating effects sequestration is having on HUD and those who benefit from the agency's work. Because of Congress's failure to pass legislation to reduce the deficit, the federal government is making across-the-board spending cuts to domestic and defense programs, including HUD and all its related agencies. These cuts are having a profound impact on people, especially in the rental and homeless assistance programs, and families in my district are feeling this firsthand. The housing authorities in my district will soon be forced to consider terminating approximately 1,800 families from housing assistance. Cuts to housing authorities will affect their capacity and their efficiency to serve low-income individuals and families, the elderly, the disabled, all of whom need these programs to survive. Our focus in a community should be to do everything possible to prevent homelessness, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Montana seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, like most Montanans, I was appalled to learn that the IRS had deliberately targeted groups for investigation based on their beliefs. Given these events, it would be senseless to empower the IRS to oversee major aspects of the American health care system, yet that's what Obamacare calls for. That's why I've signed on to the Keep the IRS Off Your Health Care Act, which states that the IRS may not be involved in any aspect of President Obama's health care law. In fact, just last night, I held a teletown hall meeting with thousands of my fellow Montanans, and more than 90% of those who participated agreed that the IRS should be stripped of its power to implement Obamacare. The American people have every right to demand that their government is accountable and that their government's actions are driven by a desire to serve the American people, not by political motivation. With the IRS's recent abuse of power, it's sadly clear that stopping the IRS from using its power to oversee Americans' health care is a necessary step. Thank you, and I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise to ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to congratulate the 2013 NCAA Men's Volleyball Championship team from my alma mater, the University of California, Irvine. The UC system is one of the best public college systems in the world. And UC Irvine, through its academics, its research, and athletics, continues to make me proud. The volleyball team recently won their 4th championship in 7 years. It's amazing. Congratulations especially goes to Connor Hughes, the tournament's most outstanding player. He joined Chris Austin, Michael Brinkley, Colin Mering, and Kevin Tilley on the all-tournament team. And hats off to Coach David Kiffin, who just is the second coach in 44 years of men's volleyball history to coach a team to a championship in his first year. You've made us all proud. Go Anteaters. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Tennessee seek recognition? The gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My constituents are asking me this question. What does this administration have against expanding energy production? More American energy means more American jobs. We all know that that is true. It also would mean lower energy costs, stronger national security, and a boost to our economy, a boost that we badly need with 12 million Americans out of work. Yet the President has seemed to stymie the energy sector at every single turn. We're going to give him the opportunity to change that record as we bring another bill forward that would approve moving forward with the northern route of the Keystone Pipeline. Now, we all know that burdensome overregulation by this administration has caused energy output domestically on our federal lands to decrease significantly, about 30%. It hampers our ability to be productive. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
This week, we saw heartbreaking images of devastation following a tornado in Moore, Oklahoma, that is estimated to have been more than a mile wide. The scope of the disaster reminds us that we're all at the mercy of nature's whims, but it also reinforces a sense of community that we share as Americans. When the funnel cloud dissipated, Oklahomans were met by friends, neighbors, and Red Cross aid workers ready to help, same as the victims of Sandy along the Jersey Shore, same as those who've weathered the waters of Katrina in the 9th Ward. One thing every American can rely on in the face of disaster is that every other American wants to help. Whether we face tornadoes on the Great Plains or earthquakes in Los Angeles, we face them together. Let's make sure these victims get the federal disaster aid they need on a timely basis. Whether we are enduring in a red state or a blue one, we are all equally deserving of each other's assistance.
Time's expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina rise?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Parents know all too well the sinking feeling that settles in around the kitchen table when it's time to pay bills. Utilities costs take up more and more each month, and the once simple task of putting gas in the car has become an act of financial acrobatics. Heading into a long, hot summer, House Republicans are committed to an all-of-the-above American energy strategy. If there's more American energy, prices will be more affordable, and there'll be more American jobs, period. Who would stand in the way of that? Apparently President Obama. The President continues to play favorites in the energy sector and block domestic energy with onerous regulations. Red tape only makes it harder to capitalize on economic growth opportunities and harder to achieve energy independence. If the President were just to sign off on the Keystone XL pipeline today, he'd open up thousands of American jobs, but for 5 years he has refused. House Republicans are serious about expanding energy production. It's time the President got serious too. I yield back.
Time's expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to acknowledge and congratulate John Laird, a constituent of mine in Santa Cruz, California. Today, John is being hosted at the White House as one of the 10 persons to be presented the Harvey Milk Champions of Change Award. John Laird is a committed public service, counting 23 years in elective office and 40 years in public life overall. He also happens to be gay. John's years of leadership prove that people are people and they have myriad skills to share. Sexual orientation doesn't somehow change that desire to serve others. Currently, John serves as the California Secretary of Natural Resources, where he does an outstanding job of overseeing the state's vast outdoor resources. Again, I say congratulations to Secretary John Laird for being true to himself and true to public's calling, and all of us in the state of California being the ones who benefit from it. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, today I rise in support of the Keystone XL pipeline and urge passage of H.R. 3, the Northern Route Approval Act. In the 1,700 days that the Trans-Canada has been waiting for approval,
for Keystone XL, the State Department has issued over 15,000 pages of documents analyzing the project's environmental impact. This administration continues to delay and impede efforts to foster oil and natural gas production under an all-of-the-above energy solution. Recent advances in technology have put America in the center of a booming natural gas industry, particularly in my area in the PA 10th District. And a NATO Parliamentary Assembly report estimates that our shale will provide gas to supply the United States for the next 90 years at least. If Americans have access to vast and affordable resources, why are we not utilizing them? The same NATO PA report emphasized that the U.S. could lead the world in oil and natural gas production. It's time to build. Remove the roadblocks preventing construction of the jobs-creating, economy-boosting Keystone XL pipeline. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky seek recognition?
Request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, as the reckless across-the-board cuts in federal spending known as sequestration continue, I want to share a letter I received from one of my constituents, Leslie and Brian Tucker. Quote, after being robbed by our home lender during the mortgage modification fiasco, my wife took a job with Jefferson County Public Schools and turned it into a career. She earned a certificate in childhood development and went to work in Duval Learning Center in early childhood education as an assistant. After hard work, she rose to a lead teacher position. I am a union steelworker with bad insurance. We have 3 children together. The youngest is 13 months, the oldest is 16 years old. My wife recently was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism and will require an expensive procedure to fix it. The news of her sequester-caused layoff hit us especially hard, as it seems every time we get ahead of step, something knocks us back down. Middle-class life now requires 2 incomes. Without my wife's job, we will undoubtedly end up drawing some sort of assistance. If Congress can fix travel delays with the stroke of a pen, then helping my wife and the other teachers in Louisville being laid off should be a walk in the park. Madam Speaker, I urge my colleagues to listen to the Tuckers and end sequestration. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, like all Americans, my thoughts and prayers are extended to the people of Oklahoma this day. I also rise to pay tribute to a modern-day heroine, Miss Frances J. Monson, who passed away last week. Frances, the wife of Thomas S. Monson, president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, led a life full of service, love, and dedication to her family, her friends, and her faith. Her daughter Anne has remarked of Miss Monson, instead of looking for the recognition of the world, she has always received her recognition of worth from the such things as a happy smile of a son or the outstretched hand of a grandchild. In 1998, she was the recipient of the Continuum of Caring Humanitarian Award by the Friends of St. Joseph Villa. But she never asked for a lot of attention. Instead, she turned to serve others with a compassionate and caring attitude. Her life was a shining example of one filled with faith, hope, and charity. On a very personal note, President and Mrs. Monson have always been a source of inspiration to me and my family. I want to thank them for their great example of godly love, which has served as a model for more than 14 million Mormons around the world. She will be greatly missed, but her devotion to her faith has touched so many, it will undoubtedly leave a lasting impression upon the world. And with that, Madam Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Nevada seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to encourage my colleagues to join me as original co-sponsors of the Pay As You Rate Act. The Veterans Administration currently has more than 1 million backlog cases, and 70% of these have been under review for more than 125 days. For some veterans, like those in southern Nevada, the average time to process a claim is close to 500 days, and this is just unacceptable. The Pay As You Rate Act will ensure that veterans receive at least some of their benefits in a more timely fashion. Currently, the VA withholds benefit payments to veterans until their entire claim has been reviewed and processed. This is a serious problem, especially for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans whose average claim contains 8.5 separate components. The Pay-As-You-Rate Act will require the VA to pay veterans benefits as each element of the claim is reviewed rather than waiting until the entire package has been processed. This is a common sense change which will put money in veterans' pockets sooner and also address the backlog. I yield back.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in recognition of National Foster Care Month. All children deserve a safe, loving, and permanent home. Yet more than 400,000 of this nation's children in foster care are still looking for such a place where safe, supportive, and stable families can help nurture their dreams to reality. Mr. Speaker, our nation can never forget these amazing young people, and we should all thank the thousands of caregivers already answering the call and working tirelessly to help these children in need. But together, we must pledge to do more. Despite the best efforts of thousands, many foster youth struggle to find a permanent home. We are a nation good enough and great enough to answer this call. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlelady from Hawaii seek recognition?
Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The mantra for at least 4 years has been the federal budget deficit. But for some reason, it is now rather quiet. And the question we should be asking is why? Could it be because last week the CBO has readjusted its projections and has determined that the government's annual deficit is shrinking faster than expected, actually shrinking? The deficit, which topped 10% of the gross domestic product in 2009 and exceeded $1 trillion a year, is now expected to shrink to $642 billion this fiscal year, $200 billion lower than expected. Deficit is expected to be 2.1% of the GDP by 2015, a rate that is deemed manageable by the CBO. So why aren't we talking about this? Just so we're clear, the $200 billion is not due to the sequestration. Shouldn't we be saying something is going right? Could it just be that the implementation of the Obama policies may be working? Imagine if we implemented it all. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about it so the people can clearly hear. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Speaking unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute with eyes that sit on the cards.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the courage and the bravery of those servicemen and women who have paid the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our most cherished principles. This Memorial Day, we honor their lives in the name of freedom, and we owe them our deepest respect and gratitude, but even more, we owe them our allegiance to the principles for which they have given so much. We reflect upon these ideals as we have on this day for the past 145 years. Service to one's country is a value that has been deeply ingrained in American heritage, and especially in my home state of Georgia. You would be hard-pressed to find someone who did not either personally serve or have a family member or a friend who has served. Mr. Speaker, my home district has recently lost 37 of these unforgettable heroes, and it is in their memory that I would like to give my deepest regard to the service members who have laid down their lives and the families whose loved ones have been laid to rest for our great nation. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlelady from Texas seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute.
The gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Again, let me offer my deepest concern and sympathy for our fellow Americans in Oklahoma. What an enormous tragedy and devastation. And our friends in North Texas. America is embracing them as we should. I rise today to acknowledge, as we look toward this coming weekend, to honor those who have fallen in battle, and to be able to celebrate the experience that members of Congress, women members of Congress, had this morning in commemorating the War Memorial for Women, and to salute Brigadier General Wilma Vaught, who was the founder and originator, along with members of Congress, of this historic memorial. Today we ascended to Arlington Cemetery, where we placed a wreath in honor of those women. 154 women have fallen in Afghanistan and Iraq. We had the privilege of honoring 5 women from the 5 military branches, and to, again, pay tribute to those who are willing to sacrifice. Men and women sacrifice. They are parents. Mothers leave behind their children and families. Families depend upon women in many different ways. And it is greatly an honor to be able to honor those women, and to say as well that we will never, never forget those men and women that have fallen in battle. And we will be there on Memorial Day, as I will be in my Heights location doing a flag ceremony, and at the Veterans Cemetery, because this is what America does. We never forget those who fell in battle for us. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition? The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 1,700 days and counting. That's how long it's been since the application to build the Keystone XL pipeline was submitted to the State Department. And with each passing day, every new delay, job creation has been stalled, and American energy independence has been pushed back to the back burner. That is why I'm pleased to join my colleagues in saying no more roadblocks to American-made energy. No more roadblocks to the 40,000 jobs that will be created during the construction of the Keystone Pipeline, not to mention the jobs to run it and operate it in the future. The time for the Keystone XL Pipeline is now. The time for our energy independence is now. Let's pass this bipartisan legislation and get to work for the American people. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like today to be able to begin with a quote. We're tired of waiting, and we believe that the time has come to make the final decision on one of the most important projects to unlock the future for this country, the Keystone XL pipeline. Mr. Speaker, this quote is not from an energy titan. This comes from Sean McGarvey of the AFL-CIO. The time has come for America and North America to be able to seek and achieve energy self-sufficiency. This is part of the solution. Americans are tired of not planning for the future. We need to unleash that potential to be able to put our people back to work. The time has come. The time is now. Let's get America back to work. Let's create energy security right here on this continent. With that, I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back his time. The chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. Pursuant to Section 3 of the Protect Our Kids Act of 2012, Public Law 112-275, I am pleased to appoint Mr. Robert E. Bud Kramer of Huntsville, Alabama, to the Commission to Eliminate Child Abuse and Neglect Fatalities. Thank you for your attention to this appointment. Signed sincerely, Nancy Pelosi, Democratic Leader.
Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. Pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on May 22, 2013 at 11:08 a.m. Appointments, Military Compensation and Retirement Modernization Commission. Signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas.
What purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by the direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 228 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 27, House Resolution 228. Resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 3 to approve the construction, operation, and maintenance of the Keystone XL pipeline and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 90 minutes, equally divided among and controlled by the respective chairs and ranking minority members of the Committees on Transportation and Infrastructure, Energy and Commerce, and Natural Resources. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. In lieu of the amendments in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committees on Transportation and Infrastructure, Energy and Commerce, and Natural Resources now printed in the bill, it shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 113-11. That amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against that amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. No amendment to that amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order except those printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill or to the amendment in the nature of a substitute made in order as original text. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 hour.
For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to my colleague on Rules Committee, the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule and the underlying bill. House Resolution 228 provides a structured rule for consideration of H.R. 3, the Northern Route Approval Act. The rule makes 10 of the 25 amendments submitted to the Rules Committee in order, 9 of which were sponsored by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And it provides for a robust debate in the House of Representatives. The underlying bill was marked up by 3 committees of jurisdiction, and each committee reported the bill favorably with a bipartisan vote. Additionally, the U.S. Senate on March 22, 2013, voted to approve the pipeline by a vote of 62 to 37. Mr. Speaker, there are 4 simple reasons this bill has garnered bipartisan support. It creates American jobs, it increases our energy independence, it strengthens our national security, and it will contribute to lower gas prices. This bill leads where the President has wavered and finally approves the northern route of the Keystone XL pipeline, which has been studied for over 1,700 days by 10 federal agencies and several state environmental agencies. The U.S. Department of State has issued 4 environmental impact statements at a total length of 15,500 pages. These studies prove that the vast majority of the project will not result in a significant environmental impact, and mitigation efforts will be undertaken to reduce any environmental impact. Additionally, the project includes 57 project-specific special conditions to ensure the maximum level of safety. Due to these conditions, the U.S. State Department's environmental impact statement found that the pipeline will have, quote, a degree of safety over any other typical constructed domestic oil pipeline system, end quote. For 4 long years, multiple studies, and well over 15,000 pages of environmental analysis, the administration claims that the XL pipeline still cannot be approved. We all hear the echo of the President chiding Congress with his slogan, "We can't wait." I would like to ask, Mr. Speaker, if not now, when? This bill answers that question, and the answer is today. It is clear that this pipeline will create jobs, increase national security, and contribute to lower gas prices. For this reason, H.R. 3 breaks the presidential logjam and improves this worthwhile project. On December 23, 2011, both the U.S. House and the Senate unanimously approved and the President signed into law a bill that required the President to approve the pipeline, unless the President determined that the project did not serve national interest. On January 18, 2012, the President said no to the pipeline, claiming that it did not serve national interests. By preventing this project and moving forward, he said no to 42,100 construction and manufacturing jobs at a time when Americans need work. He said no to cheaper gas prices for goods and services, which could result in reduced energy costs. As you know, Mr. Speaker, lower energy costs lead to lower manufacturing and shipping costs, which in turn contribute to less grocery, gas, and utility bills for the average American family. He said no to increased diversification of America's oil supply. He said no to reduced dependence on foreign oil. All these benefits this generation could pass on to future generations. By this inaction, the President said yes to more oil from barges from the Middle East. When the pipeline is finalized, it will transport 830,000 barrels of oil each day, with totals nearly half of our current daily imports from the Middle East. The President said yes to our ally Canada taking its business elsewhere to China rather than the United States. The oil from the tar sands of Canada will go on the market somewhere, whether we approve the XL pipeline or not. This is our chance to ensure Americans will have the opportunity to benefit from the energy supply, not China. The State Department acknowledged that the United States will be more secure if we relied more heavily on a non-OPEC source such as Canada for our energy needs. According to the State Department, and I quote, "Non-OPEC Canadian crude oil supplies advance the energy security of the United States, given China's close proximity, our free trade agreements, and our close bilateral relationship with a stable democracy," end quote. Canada is more reliable and cost-efficient source of energy than foreign oil that we depend on from the Middle East, Africa, and other regions of the world. For these reasons, Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this rule and an underlying legislation. The relevant committees of jurisdiction have provided us with bipartisan bill that will create American jobs, ensure energy independence, increase our national security, and contribute to the lower gas prices. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on the rule and yes on the underlying bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Florida reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized for as much time as he wishes to consume.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in opposition to the rule and the underlying bill, the Northern Route Approval Act. In the words of Yogi Berra, it's deja vu all over again here in the House of Representatives. Last week, the House of Representatives repealed the Affordable Care Act for the 37th time. This week, for the 8th time in 2.5 years, we're voting yet again on another Keystone Pipeline measure that will never become law. The very decision to sign this law would lie with the same president upon whose desk this decision is currently awaiting approval. Therefore, this is yet another waste of taxpayer time, taxpayer money, when we have pressing national issues we should be discussing: how to address our budget deficit, how to get our economy moving, how to renew affordable college and low interest rates for students. There are so many issues that my constituents are crying out for. Yet another symbolic issue that has nothing to do with whether the Keystone Pipeline is approved or not is the last thing we should be spending our time here on the floor of the People's House debating. Rather than creating a bill that's more viable, instead this bill by far is the worst iteration of the bill that we've seen, worst of the 8. Even my colleagues who support construction of the 875-mile pipeline are having trouble supporting this bill because of its thinly veiled messaging that guts important laws and waives judicial review. In short, this Northern Route Approval Act is a regulatory earmark, a specific earmark which this House of Representatives has purported to eliminate. Not only is it an earmark, it's an earmark that is a far greater dollar value than any of the earmarks that have been much maligned by members of both parties and are no longer part of this deliberative body. At a time where we should be advancing on renewable energy policy, on an all-of-the-above energy policy, this bill would bypass the very system that this Congress has set up under the law for consideration of a project. This project has nothing to do with gas prices. In the analysis from the Department of State, there is absolutely no indication this would have anything to do with gas prices. This is for the global market. Let's debate it for what it is. Is it a favor to Canada if we do it? Absolutely. Does it have an environmental and health impact on Americans? Absolutely. Weigh the two. Let's look at a cost-benefit. This has nothing to do with lower gas prices. If we want to talk about lower gas prices, let's do it. Let's increase fuel efficiency standards to lower gas prices. Let's look at what we're doing nationally. Let's look at our processing capacity. Let's look at alternative and public transportation. There's a lot of things we could be doing that actually would reduce gas prices. There is no analysis in the Department of State's thorough vetting of this that this would have any impact on price at the pump. This is, 5 to 10 years from now, exporting a majority for the global market. Instead of voting in this act, there's a number of other great bills that are bipartisan we could be talking about, which would reduce gas prices. Let me give an example. The Public Lands Renewable Energy Act that I helped co-author with Representative Gosar and Thompson and Heck. The Public Lands Renewable Energy Act would expand renewable energy development, create jobs, while protecting our nation's public health, environmental resources, and yes, because we expand our renewable energy development portfolio, would apply downward pressure on gas prices. This bill is talking about a review process that's already underway, well underway, I might add, for the Keystone XL pipeline. Congress itself set up the process whereby each administration, and the country has the opportunity every 4 years to elect a president. Congress set up the process where each administration has criteria for approving projects like Keystone. If we don't like the criteria, let's talk about changing those criteria in statute. That's the proper way to do it, not to shortcut the very process that Congress set up. Until then, we need to keep this process in place, and you know what? No matter what the administration does, some members of Congress aren't going to like the outcome, but we establish the ground rules, and the executive branch is administering the law that we created. Rather than interrupting the State Department's review process with this bill, which would be allowing the Department to take the necessary time to address the impacts, the concerns, the costs and benefits of this controversial pipeline. Now, although there's many issues that need to be better understood as part of the Keystone XL process, it's critical that we address pipeline safety issues to make sure that tar sands don't spill into our communities. It's not a Republican or Democratic issue. Everybody wants to make sure that America is safe, even if we do a major favor for Canada. There's no indications that pipelines like Keystone XL are more susceptible to oil spills because there are indications that this pipeline could be more susceptible to oil spills because of the higher pressure that this type of pipeline uses compared to conventional crude. In fact, in the public comment period, many Americans expressed their concern that a spill could impact their property value, their health, their safety, access to clean drinking water, and quality of life. These are the types of things the administration is rightfully weighing in determining the outcome. Now, while others argue that pipelines are the safest way to transport tar sands crude oil, the 150,000-gallon oil spill in Mayflower, Arkansas 2 months ago shows an example about the inadequacy of some of our current pipeline safety regulations. I've heard arguments that the pipeline could create economic benefit. Well, communities like Mayflower certainly won't see the benefits of Keystone when their yards, homes, and businesses are buried in a thick black layer of tar sands crude oil, threatening agriculture and local economic development. I think that we should make sure that tar sands developers adhere to pipeline safety standards that protect our health of Americans and protect our economy and protect jobs to ensure that any project goes forward doesn't destroy jobs rather than create them. To address pipeline safety issues, Mr. Tonko of New York's offered a common-sense amendment. He'll be here to speak about that. It would require the Secretary of Transportation to determine whether current pipeline regulations are sufficient to address space safety concerns that are particular to transporting tar sands crude oil. Unfortunately, however, this rule, which I strongly oppose, as well as the underlying bill, does not allow for the discussion, even the debate, about Mr. Tonko's amendment, which I think is a common-sense requirement. Since this bill doesn't require the pipeline regulations requested by Mr. Tonko, I'm pleased that at least an amendment that I offer with Ms. Chu of California and Mr. Connolly of Virginia was made in order. This amendment would require the Government Accountability Office to evaluate the true cost of a potential spill from the Keystone XL pipeline in our communities. The GAO study would look at the impact of tar sand spills on public health, the environment, and the quantity and quality of water available for agriculture to farmers and to municipalities for drinking. Look, it's inevitable that the Keystone pipeline will have spills and leaks. That much we know. These spills and leaks are not only costly to clean up, and we need to know and understand those costs, but they also take a toll on our communities. Accidents happen. Understanding the cost of spills is also important because the Keystone Pipeline is slated to cross over the Ogallala Aquifer. The Ogallala Aquifer lies beneath 8 states, including my home state of Colorado, and supplies drinking water to about 2 million Americans and supplies 30% of the irrigation water for our nation's farmers. TransCanada stated that it will provide alternative water supplies to affected communities if an oil spill impacts surface or groundwater, but TransCanada promised to provide alternative water supplies in case of an oil spill is not enough insurance for millions of Americans who rely on the Ogallala Aquifer for drinking water and for farming. We simply need more information about the potential impact and the range of impact that an oil spill would have on the Ogallala Aquifer. Mr. Speaker, if my colleagues, even if my colleagues support the President if he chooses to move forward with the Keystone XL pipeline, there's many reasons not to vote for H.R. 3. Rather than ensuring that we have the proper protections in place for environment and citizens, the Northern Route Approval Act mandates approval of the pipeline while waiving nearly all other federal permitting requirements. It doesn't even allow a discussion of amendments like Mr. Tonko's that were brought forward in good faith that at least deserve 10 minutes on the floor of the House, when, by the way, we're debating a bill that's never going to become law, won't be brought up in the Senate, and goes to the very same President for his signature who's considering this project. So the least we could do is spend 10 minutes debating Mr. Tonko's meaningful amendment if we're spending time debating everything else that isn't going to become law. I encourage my colleagues to oppose this rule, to support a more open and transparent process here on the floor of the House, and to move forward with legislation which deals with the critical national priorities that all of our constituents are calling upon this Congress to act upon. I reserve the balance of my time.
Colorado reserves. The gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Louisiana, Dr. Fleming.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank my friend from Florida, and Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the rule and the underlying bill. And, you know, it's very interesting that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle claim that more oil production doesn't affect the price of oil or gasoline. Well, that's the same thing as saying that gravity doesn't exist and the earth is still flat. Neither one of those are true. We all know that it's a marketplace, it's a commodity, and the more you produce, the lower the price. How well do I know that? In my own district in Louisiana, we've produced more natural gas than we can use, and the price now is so low we can hardly produce it because of the low reimbursement for the cost it is to do it. But that'll come up over time. You know, 2 cents a gallon in one day is how much gasoline prices have recently increased. 7 cents a gallon just in the last week. It may not sound like much, but the price of gas is going up once again. One headline says, quote, "Gas prices spike ahead of Memorial Day," end quote. And that's hitting just about every American in the wallet. And yet the President continues to play games with a project that will carry an estimated 830 barrels of oil per day from Canada to the Gulf Coast for processing. So what are we waiting for? More studies? This project's been studied to death. Every state that it would go through has already sent its approval. It's been 1,700 days since TransCanada first applied to the State Department for permission to build the Keystone XL pipeline. TransCanada says pipeline construction will create about 20,000 jobs. And our colleagues on the other side of the aisle says, why aren't we talking about jobs? 20,000 jobs, good-paying jobs, plus lower prices to the consumer. But the Obama administration's...
30 seconds.
Gentleman has 30 seconds.
I thank the gentleman. But the Obama administration State Department has politicized this project, installed it in order to kowtow to the far-left environmental fringe. We need the jobs and we need the energy benefits. We need the lower cost for consumers and for manufacturing. And with that, I thank the gentleman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Mr.